Arcdox.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was wrong in here, not there.
Okay.
Hello, I'm on. First time I've used one of these, so it's working. Thank you very much for staying with us. It's been a long but very interesting day, I've found it. Some great speakers and some different views, and it's been quite heartening to have the echoes of some of our thinking and some of our shared challenges. Accent and Arcdox go back quite a way, and in the last year or so have formed a partnership through opportunities in the marketplace. And our partnership, Living BIM, is going to share some of our challenges and some of our thoughts with you this afternoon. Touching on a point made this morning, our approach is very much push and pull in terms of the market. Ralph and his team have been market leaders in bringing and pushing BIM in Ireland. We now have a market, we now have a development cycle, we now see cranes, which is great to see, and activity and gainful employment for all of the professional disciplines. Our background is from the pull side. We have dealt with property, providing advisory, management, tactical and strategic services. And we're very much pulling through these efficiencies, these processes, with a broader perspective and a broader life cycle of the asset. Now, we've talked about the planning stage, the design stage, the construction stage, moving into operations, but I also want to give mention to the occupational phase of the property as well, where we are engaging with stakeholders varying from occupiers to investors, to tenants and to people. Those are the stakeholders who occupy and use the property assets which our industry develops.
Thanks, John. So just to introduce myself and Arcdox, Pat and I, our background is in architecture and in the capital delivery phase of projects, delivering big projects previously. We set up 6 years ago, actually, a BIM consultancy practice to help companies, because we saw BIM coming down the tracks and we realized people are going to need support, help with this. And in that time, you know, we've worked on over 60 projects, we've trained a lot of people. But John and I are having lots of interesting conversations, because obviously, as John has explained, we come from different ends of the world. And to be honest, as an architect, I had no idea what FM community do. And but the conversation started, and that's probably my next slide, is where did this idea of Living BIM start? We were discussing one day, and I said, you know, it's really strange that out of the 60 plus projects we've worked on over the years, I can almost say that almost all of them have died. You know, at some point in time, the process has just stopped. You know, for whatever reason we were doing BIM, we achieved the goal. You know, it could have been a designer trying to get a more efficient way of producing drawings, or it could have been a contractor or subcontractor trying to coordinate a bit of work. But I don't believe, and I'll stand to be corrected, that any of those projects have really gone on to use BIM or leverage BIM effectively in the operational phase, which, as you heard this morning from Claire, is a very extended period of the life of a building. And you know, we just said, well, wouldn't it be nice if the BIM could stay living? And the term's actually been used a few times today. Last year, the CETA Smart Collaboration Challenge gave us an opportunity to discuss that. So we got together 6 organizations, ourselves, but we also got a major client who had a portfolio of 150 properties around the country. We've got some software vendors together, and we had a 4-day workshop to discuss this idea of what are the challenges of using information or sort of carrying out information management during the post-construction stage. And we had some very interesting discussions, and we came second in the challenge, which was great. I suppose our core conclusions was that there were great problems with the way documentation or information was handed over in the first place, and that the management of information in the post-construction stage was very complicated and through multiple disconnected systems. So.
As we touched on earlier on, our perspective is a broader perspective across the whole asset life cycle. So our services and our view feed into the new build sector, but also existing real estate as well. And it was interesting this morning, again, picking up a point of this two aspects of BIM data and non-BIM data, and how they can be married, they can be connected under the umbrella of the same property, the same portfolio, the same client, and what have you. And it has been said before, but I will repeat that it's about the information, or it's about the data, and how it is created, how it's maintained, how it's valued, and getting the leverage out of that, informing, working with clients so as there is clear realization of both the value of their physical asset, the portfolio, the shopping centre, the mixed-use development, but also alongside that, and absolutely connected to that, the value of the information across the range of data sets. And the world and the industry that we want to move forward, where it becomes standard that information can be digital, searchable, accurate, and useful. To use the phrase of the last speaker, that we can trust the information. We've a way to go. We all have experiences at the start of projects, during projects, dealing with properties, taking over properties, providing services to property, of looking for information. The variety of formats, the amount of time spent on engaging with information. And is it accurate? Is it useful? Does it have any value? It's been very good to interact today with the community, and the BIM community is an open community, and there are a number of stakeholders, a number of relationships that we have in going about our work. It's just an iteration of the range of people, the range of stakeholders, the range of people handling, producing, handing over, or handing off, as was said earlier on, information. And unfortunately, the disconnects which currently occur, the challenge that we find ourselves, that these multiple disconnected silo-based transactions and the depreciation of the information because of the processes that we've used heretofore. We're on a journey, but our industry's vision is surely to move towards leveraging that information, connecting it, centralizing it as appropriate, and sharing, collaborating, and having access to information. So if I am providing a maintenance service to a property, if I am providing legal advice to a client who has a property portfolio, if I am the tenant of a property, if I am a project manager who's been asked to oversee the refurbishment of a development, by way of a few examples, that we can all somehow get ourselves onto the one page. This is a graphic which again was touched upon earlier on about the digital world that we now live in. A number of sectors have led the way. Our own sector is catching up, but it's doing things more efficiently and using machines to do things which they do well, which saves us time. We have clarity of information and we can make decisions. We can make decisions about which flight to book to which airport, or we can make decisions about design decisions or operational decisions or information based on trusted information in managing our assets. And BIM is very much at the forerunner of that in terms of the visualization of information. I think, as Claire said earlier on, many of us are not trained or used to interacting with data, with 2D information. I think that we're in greater number those who can see something, understand it, work with it, and from a client perspective, make decisions, and those who are instructed or those on the team can then implement those decisions. And BIM and the associated systems allow us to visually look, to drill down to the data, to drill down to the detail, the visual detail, and interrogate, make decisions, implement and act.
Okay. So we, based on the research we did last year, we decided to continue the conversation and develop this idea further that, how would we keep BIM living? But we decided to make the challenge a bit more interesting. And so it's all very well if we go through a development cycle, new build, and we can specify BIM, and we get to the end of the project, and we have this fantastic data. But what do we do with all the buildings out there at the moment? Well, 90% of the buildings that are out there are still going to be around in 20 years, 30 years, 50 years. Can we actually apply the methodology of BIM and in particular PAS 11923, which is the specification that deals with information management for the operational phase? How can we start applying this thinking to existing projects? And that we might start with BIM as a placeholder, of information that you keep developing over time, and that, as I'll explain later with PAS 11923, any event that happens, you keep developing up. So you might start with 2D information, which is all that you might have available for an existing building, but you might build simple models around that, which then become the placeholders of information. You add in details about levels and floors and spaces and departments, down to the rooms. And for whatever reason, you might start adding the components within those spaces. It might be a fit out, a reconfiguration, whatever. So you don't have to build complicated models of existing buildings right from the start, but you can start with very simple models and just keep layering information in as you go along, until you have the detailed component information within that, and then you start linking, as Kimon and everyone else has spoken about today, linking information back to databases. I suppose it's one of the problems. This is an industry paper, not an academic paper. We were just trying to speak from our industry experience, and when you've been following people like Kimon and Otto and all the rest of them for the last 5 years, a lot of this might sound quite repetitive. But we took a look at the information model, at its life cycle. And when we talk about the information model as described in PAS 11923, it's not the 3D model. It's all of it. It's the documents. It's the non-graphical data. It's the graphical data. We realize there's huge amount of effort and cost put into producing that information, gathering that information during the design construction, and that's kind of the phase we understand. Some of it in design, actually a lot of it during construction. But the typical scenario, and as was discussed and discovered in talking to the likes of John and clients that are operating buildings, is that from handover, this happens. The information enters a cycle of continually depleting and degrading. Somebody takes a drawing out of the file to go do something, forgets to put it back. Somebody goes and changes something in the building, but forgets to put new information into the data set. And slowly but surely the information degrades, and then it becomes it loses its usefulness over time. And what we saw in PAS 11923, and we were thinking about existing buildings, is you could actually just make a decision today to implement PAS 11923 on existing buildings, which asks you to do a few things. It asks you to set out an information strategy for your building, for your portfolio, whatever. It asks you to consider the asset that you're managing and what are the information requirements around that asset. And if you're going to do any work to that asset, be it a fit out or a renovation or an extension, that you'd actually drill that back through PAS 1192 and get all the new information in this format as well. And by implementing this strategy, you would actually turn the tide on what's happening to your information. Now, it doesn't matter where you are in the process and existing. Obviously, the closer you can bring that line to the beginning of the project, the better. The cost of implementing a strategy like this would be almost zero if you implement it right at the beginning of a project. The longer you leave it, the more it's going to cost you because your information would have degraded. The value that having this information strategy would bring to your project would be highest the earlier you can implement it. But obviously for existing buildings, you are where you are. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't implement the strategy, because it would just continue to develop. So I better move on very quickly. So just our understanding of PAS 11923 is that you would look at your asset management activities, what's going on a day-to-day basis, and obviously those things require information. So to document what is the information we need to operate these facilities in an asset information requirement document. Where's the information going to come from? It's going to come from the asset information model, which is the graphical data, non-graphical data, which of course is the published folder of your CDE, your common data environment. Those activities are going to trigger, some of those activities are going to trigger a requirement to update your information. It could be maintenance work, minor works, fit-outs, renovations. So you're looking out for these triggers, and whenever information has to be updated, you would pull that information out of your asset information model, you'd stick it into work in progress, you'd update it, fix it up, whatever you have to do, start sharing it with your team through an approvals process, eventually share it with your client and get their authorization to put it back into the published folder, and take any of the information that has been updated and stick it out back into the archive. So that way, if you follow this information management process for all of those event triggers, that way you could be sure that your information was always up to date and reliable and trustful. And that's what the information that you ultimately need to link to your other enterprise systems and processes. So the CDE has to do quite a lot of things. I mean, it has to be a central repository, obviously, but it needs to contain graphical data, non-graphical data, documents, managed workflows, all those things listed there. Actually, I won't go through them. And this can be applied, in our opinion, to existing buildings, this kind of strategy. Like, you might start with very poor information on your existing building, but if you had the management process in place, over time, with everything that happened to your building, you would actually be building up your information assets. So we looked at, a lot of people would argue we're using digital technologies anyway, we are already on projects, and are they helping? The easy way is to ask, well, where is your information? Some of it's in the handover documentation you received, some of it's in paper drawings and schedules, some of it's in a multitude of systems that do different things, whether it's document management systems or BMS systems, or, and again, I won't read through all of these, but they are multiple disconnected systems. You might even have a BIM, you might even have COBE for the project, but it's multiple systems. And we go back to John's original questions, and you ask yourself, is it accessible in that format? No, it's accessible to maybe one party or two parties. Is it searchable? No. So it is digital, but is it accurate? We're not sure. Some of those things might be out of sync. And is it reliable? So what might an integrated solution look like? So we discussed this. I mean, either there's a super system that does everything, and I think a lot of companies are doing that, and I think there's some good reasons why you might do that for certain projects, but that wouldn't be suitable to everybody. One is because a lot of people have heavily invested in legacy systems and training, etc. the other alternative we thought about was maybe if you just connect these systems. So a lot of those systems are good at what they do. So you just need to connect them, and this is a common message, I suppose, even the BIM. But that way, it would be a much lighter amount of development, more agile and less training, because people could continue to use the systems that they were used to working. So I suppose for us, that was the thing. So we wanted to take all those bits of digital information, including BIM, try and digitize the paper, connect all those things through data services, and where we are at the moment would be a range of data services. Some of it could be through web services, APIs, but others might be through manual tools of importing, exporting. You'd obviously have to stick a layer of security and access control on that. We did see that you would have to warehouse the data, because in this kind of disconnected world, not all those systems would be online at the same time to be able to make an API call. So you need to warehouse it and wait until the next one comes along. You need to have industry standards. So what are you comparing it to? You'd need to have client requirements. How are you going to manage your expectations? You'd need to have a records of all these transactions. Who provided that bit of information? When did they provide it? Why did they provide it? And ultimately, because all of those systems have been developed on, with different data structures in mind, you'd have to kind of have mapping tables to deal with this. But you would deal with it on a one-to-one basis as you're going. But I think everybody said to me, behind all, that's the complex technical solution. But in front of that must be something easy for people to use. Like just, for clients, they just want to see their portfolio of buildings on a map. They want to go and drill down onto a campus. They want to look at a building, find a floor plan, zoom in on a particular unit, see the spaces that are in that unit, see the components that they have to manage within those spaces, and get some details about those spaces. And they might want some reports on the information that's housed in the system in a sort of easy to read, the kind of thing you can take to a boardroom meeting. So you can sum up?
Just as we're over time, so we are actively working on projects with clients at different stages of the cycle. As we've emphasized today, working with clients with existing portfolios, clients who've acquired portfolio, there's been a lot of activity in the market, but also into the development cycle as well. So our journey has led us to, as well as act as a service provider, is to begin to look at the opportunity to provide some technical piece to our offering. And as Ralph has touched upon, we have applied for secured initial funding and are working to develop our proof of concept, so as we can bring a piece to the table to link in and connect with the range of existing legacy and cloud-based systems now available. So we seek to marry our experiences to date, our service offering, with technology. And we thank you for your time, and slightly more than we were entitled to. Thank you.
Just a couple probably. But, anybody?
Just wondering with yourselves, are you looking to look for a super solution or a killer app? Are you looking to eventually bring in a cloud-based software to ultimately look after everything regards FM, or are you still going to try and integrate your CAFM system?
Well, we're looking for the opposite. So there's great cloud-based CAFM systems out there. We just want to connect to them. There's great CMS systems out there. We just want to connect to them. I think there are enough companies looking at the big solutions. I think the big solutions are good for certain types of projects, but there's lots of buildings out. If you just look out the window, that probably can't afford these big solutions and just need an easy way to connect to what they have. So it's the opposite of.
One last one. Go ahead.
So the whole idea of your app is that it's an affordable base as opposed to FSI Go or Concept Evolution's app,
Yeah.
is it? That everyday people can use it?
Absolutely.
Perfect.
Yeah. And it's just connecting. So if people are using FSI, you just connect it.